Good evening, everyone. We will be starting shortly. So give us a moment to set up the logistics with the live streaming on YouTube and Facebook, please. Thank you. Good evening. Today, we are having our second session on the series of Buddhism and sustainability. As we did last week, we have Don De Silva with us and Don Gihanta Jayasinghe. So we have two Dons with us today. We have two Dons who are going to be handling the session on Buddhist living and consumer culture. Don has, or rather Don De Silva, has had a lifelong career spanning 35 years in the area of sustainability and has worked with the United Nations Environmental Program and for the International Institute for Environment and Development. Don is also a university Buddhist chaplain, and he's very enthusiastic to bring out, to speak on what the Buddha has said about the social issues that we are currently facing in today's world. We have then Gihanta, who, following an extensive career in brand marketing and innovation, led project management with global consumer goods businesses in Sri Lanka and in the UK. Gihanta is now building a career in sustainable business with a view to contribute to clean growth in the emerging net zero, circular and ethical economy. Gihanta was also instrumental in setting up social and community-based initiatives such as We Sri Lanka, Dhamma in the Neighborhood, and Bodhi Magga in the UK to promote sustainable development and inclusivity in Sri Lanka, as well as spiritual engagement and development among like-minded companions in the UK. So we are very happy to have the both of you with us, and we are very happy that the both of you have taken this initiative to bring forward the importance of discussing the role of sustainability in Buddhism and what the Buddha said. So just a few logistics before we continue. We will be having a question and answer session at the end of Don's talk, where you will have the opportunity to ask any questions that you might have. Gihanta will also be helping and sort of asking Don questions to make the topic and subject clearer. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put any questions in the chat section, or if you are willing to speak up, you can unmute yourselves and address your questions directly as well. So thank you very much. And Don, over to you.
Thank you very much, Bhante, and thank you to all for giving up their Saturday evening to attend this second presentation on Buddhism and the consumer culture, a very interesting topic. And I also would like to welcome Don Gihanta Jayasinghe, because it's nice to have a marketing guy in my sights, which is the cause of many of the problems that we have in the world today. That's just a joke. But it's nice to welcome you here. And also to all, and those who were with me last time, but also those who are coming in new. So I'm going to share my screen, and Bhante, you need to enable me to share my screen.
I have just done so.
Oh, great. Okie doke. Brilliant. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah,
Don.
great. Now, what I need to do is to view. Yeah, brilliant. Play. Okay, there is another person called Kanti Pereira entered the waiting room. Needs to be admitted. Right. So this is about Buddhist living and consumer culture. Now I'm having problems. Okay, so what is this presentation about? What is the agenda? What is consumer culture? Looking at the world context, what is Buddhism for? What is sustainability? And what did the Buddha say especially about sustainability? The global purpose of his teaching. Where does sustainable consumption start in Buddhism? The Buddha's response to corrupt living, governance and its impact on people, human trafficking, safeguarding of women and girls, mindful eating, recycling amongst the Sangha, healing with nature, and what Buddhism offers to the world in terms of paradigm shifts, drawing conclusions from what the Buddha said and did and their relevance for our daily lives and the world today. So this discourse or this presentation is based on the Pali Canon. And we hear in Buddhism the word sutta, which is generally regarded as a discourse the Buddha or his contemporaries made during that time. It also means threading together or sewing. The word is somewhat similar to the English word suture and also the Latin suture. Suture, of course, in medicine, as most of you know, or all of you know, means a process to hold tissues together after an injury or surgical procedure. Professor Gombrich, who is the president of the Oxford Center for Buddhist Studies, in his recent book, Buddhism and Pali, by the way, please get hold of this and read it. This is a really interesting, short book, says that the number of sermons, of course, in the Pali Canon is very large. Theravada Buddhists count them as somewhere around 17,505. And cites the reference of Sumangala Vilasini pages 20 to 23. So in my presentations, I like to try and leave commentaries concerning what Buddhism is all about. I don't want to go there because there are many others who can do that work much better than I can. My focus is on actually what the Buddha said and did on critical, important issues. And the suttas are rich in dealing with critical and important issues that are going on in the world today. And so now let's take a look at what's happening in the world with the consumer culture. And the reason why I talk about taking a look at what's happening in the world is because the Buddha highlighted a global mindset. He was not about living like a frog in the well, gazing at your navel, but it is a global mindset that he talked about. Bahujana Hitaya, welfare of many people, Bahujana Sukhaya, happiness of many people, Loka Anukampayo, compassion for the world. And you will find the references, there are many, but I have given you a reference down below. So what is consumer culture? Consumer culture may be understood as a pattern of values, meanings, customs shared by a people. This is the long discourse. Consumer culture suggests that consumption, the act of buying goods and services, is a cultural activity which is imbued, replete with meanings, and which then is driven through economic or other practical factors. So our economic life depends on market forces, and the success of a nation is in buying and selling goods. There is no doubt that the market economy has lifted millions more recently in countries like India and China out of poverty, but unbridled market forces in the pursuit of wealth severely damage our lives and the environment. Vance Packard in 1957 wrote The Hidden Persuaders, which really sums up consumer culture. Hidden persuaders as in advertising, where advertising persuades us to buy things. And then David Ramsey, in his very interesting book, Total Money Makeover, an American socialist, a social critic, said, we consume things or buy things we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't like. And very often I feel that the money we don't have is what is now the debt crisis today, with people using their credit cards without awareness. And in my view, it is the way the market forces, advertising, plays to our greed, desire, ignorance, and delusion for short-term happiness and long-term profits. So let's take the world context in terms of what is happening now. We have a crisis at the moment throughout the world concerning the consumption or the availability of vaccines. Rich nations are vaccinating 1 person every second, while the majority of the world's poor, some of them, quite a lot of them, have yet to get a single dose. Then, now with some of the countries beginning to control the virus, the hope is that we return to a new normal. And what is this new normal? It is about revenge shopping, to see if it is possible for the pent-up demand for buying goods is unleashed with increasing economic growth. This is the panacea which is being suggested as return to normal. I am unsure about this return to normal, and our best chance of staying safe is to ensure that every single person in this world is vaccinated, so that we can then have a situation where we can deal with the virus. As you can see, there are variants happening all over the place. Then let's take a look at the world economy. Let's take a look at the division between the rich and the poor. The United Bank of Switzerland 2020 report, Riding the Storm, says the total wealth of the billionaires at the end of July 2020 was US dollars 10.2 trillion. The total number of billionaires, 2,158 in 2017, now 2,189. A World Bank study which deals with the COVID-19 impacts predicts that those in extreme poverty will rise to between 703 and 729 million. There is absolutely no doubt that this world economy is really rigged. Let's take a look at obesity, because these are things that we can address in life. And look at the figures from WHO for adults who are overweight, 2 billion. And 650 million are considered to be affected with obesity. This equates to 39% of men and the rest with women, of adults aged 18 or over. So the worldwide prevalence of obesity has nearly tripled since the last couple of years. Let's take a look at the fashion industry. The fashion industry, which amounts to some 2.5 trillion, is one of the biggest polluters and the second biggest consumer of water. The major issue is that most of the fabrics in cheap garments are synthetics and polyesters, which are derived from oil and petroleum production. Synthetic particles don't biodegrade. And when clothes are dumped into a landfill, toxic synthetic fibers pollute water sources. Waste is another issue which is on our doorsteps. And the World Bank estimates that 2 billion tons of municipal solid wastes annually. And the amount that you see in these figures for the UK's annual food waste, this is from WRAP, which is an organization which deals with waste, is quite critical. But only out of this number, 700,000 tons of food surplus from manufacturing, retail, and hospitality and food are redistributed via charitable organizations like the food bank system and commercial routes. Plastic items from takeaway foods dominate the litter in the world's oceans. And single-use bags, plastic bottles, food containers, and food wrappers are the foremost widespread items polluting the seas, making almost half of the human-made waste. Researchers from the Nature Sustainability Journal has found. Then the condition on mental health. 1 in 4 people will experience mental health problem each year in the UK. And since COVID-19, calls to mental health for prescriptions for antidepressants have reached an all-time high. So this is, in a nutshell, I know that there are many other critically important issues that I have not gone through or mentioned, but time is short, and these are just snapshots of what is happening around the world. So what is sustainability? the document Our Common Future, which was produced by the United Nations Environment Programme's World Commission on Environment and Development, says sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Now, excuse me. So what did the Buddha say about sustainability? Now, this is something which is interesting. I found in this reference, the Buddha talking about Dhigaratang Hitaya Sukhaya, lasting welfare and happiness. Please make a note of the term lasting, Dhigaratang. It's not short-term happiness, it is lasting happiness. What an interesting concept this is. And you will find that this concept is not pie in the sky because it is applied in countries like Bhutan. Although a tiny nation, they have developed the Bhutan, of course, is a Buddhist nation, and they have developed their economic measurements along these lines. They talk about gross national happiness instead of gross domestic product, per capita income, and so on, to measure their economic growth. And the United Nations also has a general quality index, a GNI index, which is based on welfare of people, rather than on simply just focusing on economic growth. So this is a very relevant concept for the world today at the moment. Dhigaratang Hitaya Sukhaya. So what did the Buddha teach? Now, there are so many discussions that are going on. I wonder if you have come across these discussions about what we mean by being a shramana, a renunciant, whether to be a bodhisattva or not a bodhisattva, eco-dhamma or engaged or disengaged Buddhism. Is Buddhism radical or not radical? These are discussions that have been going on for some time now, particularly amongst Buddhist communities in the UK. So here I've come across a very interesting statement by the great Venerable Valpala Rahula, who wrote in his book, What the Buddha Taught, and this was published in 1959. He was the professor of history and religions at Northwestern University, the first monk to hold a professorial chair in the Western world. And he says and puts it succinctly like this. There are some who believe that Buddhism is so lofty and sublime a system that it cannot be practiced by ordinary men and women in this workday world of ours, and that one has to retire from it to a monastery or to some quiet place if one desires to be a true Buddhist. The vast majority of people in the world cannot turn monk or retire into caves or forests. However noble and pure Buddhism may be, it would be useless to the masses of mankind if they could not follow it in their daily lives in the world today. This is in chapter 5 of the book. Please get hold of this book because it's interesting reading and it is available on several websites on the net. So my contention is that the teachings of the Buddha are radical, eco, inclusive, open, transparent, democratic, effective, and sustainable. And we don't need prefixes for the Dhamma. The Dhamma itself is relevant for what is happening in the world today. Then we have this discussion also, which is going on at the moment. Can human attitudes change given the fact that you would need paradigm shifts to deal with COVID-19 and climate change? Let's take a look at the life of the Buddha from his early years. So the Buddha was born into privilege. He was a son of the ruler of the Sakyan Janapada. And the Sakyans were an independent oligarchy, a republican state known as the Sakya Janaraj. Capital was Kapilavastu, and it was ruled by an elitist group of the warrior and the ministerial class. And here you will find the Sakyan kingdom, not easy to find particularly on this map, but it's to the right of Kosala. And slightly north of Kosala is Sravasti, where in this park, the Buddha taught many a discourse. So unmute yourself now. What do you think of this montage? Anyone? Write it in chats, in a chat forum, or unmute yourself and make a comment. Come on. Look at this projection. The life of the Buddha, which would have been something like this as a prince, and then on to my right, a monk with a few tiny amount of possessions, the alms bowl and the robes, wandering and also begging for food. And that was his life from the left to the right for 45 years. He traveled in the northern Indian area. An attitudinal change. And look at this group of two photos. On the left is what might have been a palace, and on the right is Gandhakuti in Jetavana Monastery in India, remains of the hut where the Buddha used to live. So human attitudes can change. And if you were to analyze the footprint, the carbon footprint of the Buddha, it would have been -0 degrees, going down much lower compared to the rates of consumption today. Any comments so far? Any questions, any concerns? Hello? Anybody in the chats? Okay, please ponder these issues because these issues are really quite important. And the other thing which is necessary is when you are studying suttas, please don't gloss over the first 2 or 3 lines, which gives you information about where the Buddha gave the sermon, the areas where he gave the sermon, because very often the discourses were in open parks and groves in the open air, in the midst of nature. And then you can find these places. And this is the exciting bit about it today, because in Google Earth, you can Google this, names, and find them. That makes the Dhamma live and interesting, relevant to what is going on. And most of the Buddha's inner group were from royal families who relinquished their princely privileges and duties to be truly homeless, daily begging for food, dependent on giving of the communities. And the recorder, of course, of the early Buddhist texts was Ananda, first cousin of the Buddha, who stood out amongst the others as having the best memory. The Buddha also tried all kinds of things. These are not to be tried these days, but just to put on record that he tried all kinds of different traditions before coming to and focusing on what he thought and lived. And he undertook many fasts, penances, austerity. Such was my asceticism, Sariputta, that I went naked, rejecting conventions, licking my hands, not coming when asked, not stopping when asked. I did not accept food brought or food specially made or an invitation to a meal. I received nothing from a pot, from a bowl, across a threshold. From there, he moved to the middle. So, dealing with the consumer culture, where do you first encounter sustainable development in Buddhism? Now, you must be doing this particular practice or recitation more or less every day. Have a shot, take a guess, unmute yourself. Anybody? Come on. Don't go to sleep. Hello? Anyone? Hello? Help me out. This is not a sermon in the way you're normally used to, trying to make this an interactive session.
So, yes, Don, I think I might say something here. I mean, again, I do encourage everybody in the audience to, make their comments. But you asked the question, where do you first encounter sustainable consumption? I don't know whether this is the first instance, Don, but I know when, for instance, the Uposatha or Sil is observed. Even lay people are asked to only have 2 meals during the day and to skip the evening meal. And I think Sangha as a practice generally skip the 3rd meal. So in some ways that maybe that's related to health. It might be something else, but I thought that's an interesting instance where consumption of food, the Buddha has given some instructions.
Wonderful. Any others? Dil, yes, go on.
No, there was a war between 2 of the kingdoms, I think over the river Rohini, I can't quite remember. And the people upstream wanted to block it, and the people downstream, and the Buddha prevented so many people being that by saying that it could be done so that they could share. So that was very sustainable. I don't know whether it's the first thing.
That is a brilliant, yes. Thank you so much for both comments. Thank you so much for your comment, Dil. That's a brilliant one. That is what we call in environmental diplomacy a shared natural resource. And the amount of conflicts that are there concerning shared natural resources is quite extraordinary. I'm now deviating a little bit, but to point out that that particular one I have not dealt with. I'll try and deal with it later on, but that is a very, very important instance. The first one that you encounter sustainable consumption is in the 5 precepts. I sincerely hope you haven't forgotten this. More or less all of the 5 precepts deal with consumption, one way or the other. But let's take, for the purposes of time, just one, which concerns sent the which concerns Musavada Veramani Sikkapadang Samadhyami. I undertake the precept to refrain. Sorry, excuse me. Where is it? Suramere Majjapamadattana Veramani Sikkapadang Samadhyami. I undertake the precept. I undertake an obligation. It's not a commandment. A voluntary obligation. The precept to refrain from intoxicating drinks and drugs that lead to carelessness. Just one. Why did the Buddha highlight alcoholic drinks? He observed the fact that the sentient beings who refrain from alcoholic drinks that cause clouding of the mind are few. Those who refrain are many. And then he goes on in Anguttara Nikaya, in another situation, clouds are an obscuration of the sun and moon, obscured by which does not glow, doesn't shine, doesn't dazzle. There are some contemplatives and Brahmins who drink alcohol, who do not refrain from drinking alcohol and fermented liquor. They don't glow, they don't shine, they don't dazzle. We know now from medical evidence that alcohol, drugs shatter the neurons in our brains. That is quite critically for certain. And the Buddha also highlighted corrupt and luxurious living at the time. And the interesting thing with this sutta is that he was challenged by King Ajatasattu to demonstrate whether a contemplative life played an important role in society. And then he goes on to point out, in his response, he was critical of profligate living. Whereas some Brahmins and contemplatives living a life that is supposed to be given in faith are addicted to high, luxurious living. Look at the instances that he highlighted: oversized couches, couches adorned with carved animals, long-haired coverlets, in intricate detail, white woolen coverlets, fringe, silk coverlets, large woolen carpets, antelope hide drugs, deer hide drugs, cushions for the head and the feet. He abstains from using luxurious furnishings such as these. That's a true contemplative. And the other important thing is, in terms of discourse, the Buddha spoke about these things fearlessly to a king. Ajatasattu, who was one of the powerful, or probably the powerful, ruler of the 16 Mahajanapadas at that time. So this is a very fearless statement to the ruler of the country. He was not scared of speaking his mind. What do you think? Anybody? This is what the Buddha said and did. Anyone in the chats?
I would also point out on that when we look at the 8 precepts, even for daily, even for, so here we're talking about the wealthy and the royalty. But if you are taking the 8 precepts, again, I think, I can't remember exactly which one, but one of the precepts talks about not being seated on high chairs and,
Indeed.
having adornments, and that for the spiritual life, or to pursue the spiritual life, you have to be more austere.
Indeed.
What you wear and what you consume.
Yes. Devika, do you have any problem?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Please go ahead.
On the other hand, Buddha didn't reject very luxurious presents from Anepidusitanan, like the Mala was given and all that, and didn't say anything about it, isn't it? And not to offer such presents, he never condemned or refused or commented.
What? Can you be kind enough, please, ma'am? I didn't get the first bit. I think you were your audio was.
What I was telling is, can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am. I can hear you now clearly.
Lord Buddha didn't reject or complain or preach against accepting luxurious presents given like Maligavas from Anepidusitanan.
No, there were no Maligavas given by Anathapindika at all in the suttas, but he was given a park.
But
not a Maligava, a park, a grove.
Isn't it a temple or something like that?
No. It was a park that was given by Anathapindika, a rich businessman who bought it from Prince Abhaya.
Jeta.
Was it Jeta Grove?
Yes.
Exactly right. Jeta Grove. Yeah.
Yes.
You need to check your thank you for that comment, but please check your facts.
Yeah.
Okay, but still, it was Buddha never rejected any luxurious presents, isn't it?
No, ma'am. The grove was given to the order of the monks. That wouldn't be called a luxurious. Present or gift in that sense, that it was a park, and both the Sangha and the lay devotees used the park for meetings and for staying from time to time for the purposes of making a contribution that is positive to society. That was not a luxurious gift as I would know it.
Don, may I?
Please, go ahead.
So with regards to what Lakshanti is saying, she's speaking about the offering of the monasteries, which were well done by the kings and the queens who offered them. Now, these, as Don correctly stated, these were all offered to the Sangha and not the Buddha personally. And also coming with that, now Don, you have mentioned about the luxurious furnishings and all of that. Actually, we are not supposed to be sitting on high couches, right, of any sort. The only moment that a bhikkhu can sit on a high couch is if he's only preaching Dhamma, right? And that is entirely as respect towards the Dhamma, and a bhikkhu privately cannot have these sort of what Don has mentioned in the presentation. They cannot have them as personal possessions in their lodgings. Another thing, Don, that I would like to just add is the beautiful factor of sustainability with regard to these monasteries, which was the meaning of the word pansala, which all the Sri Lankans know, pannasala, the Pali word. A pannasala, if there is no lay devotee and the bhikkhus need to stay somewhere, they can get a lodging done, but the lodging has to be the lodging which is now asked to be done has to be completed within a day, which would mean that the lodging has to be rather simple. And when the kings and queens offered, and these rich people offered things to the Sangha, they did not just offer the monastery, they always offered lands, estates to maintain and sustain the expenses. So that is another part of where I believe, which is not to place stress on the people who are practitioners, but the people who offer itself, they sort of take care of the expenses so that everyone who comes to the Buddha and is able to practice the Dhamma without that added stress of maintenance, which I believe is an important point of sustainability as well. But please continue, Don.
Thank you very much, Bhante. There is Pushpa who has got her hand up.
Yes, Pushpa.
Very stimulating discussion, Don. Sometimes I wonder why Buddha recommended the begging bowl and that way of life. Is it because it gives more time to meditate and practice Dhamma, or what is the rationale behind the begging bowl?
Yeah. Can we take that question after I finish?
Okay.
As the first one.
Yeah.
I would like to thank you so much for all your contributions. This is quite interesting. It is quite important to get this in an interactive way to keep it flowing. And also with expulsion. The interesting factor is that the Buddha took decisive action on those monks who were engaged in corruption. There was one particular time when they were staying on the bank of the Gajara lotus pond, and on that occasion, the monks were reproving a monk for an offense. And the monk was answering evasively. And the Buddha then addressed the monks and said, "Monks, eject this person. Monks, eject this person. This person should be banished." So this is an interesting situation where the Buddha called for the ejection of a monk for corrupt behavior. He was fearless in that way. He was able to adhere to governance practices in doing these things in a very open manner. Nothing was really hidden. But what I wonder is how many in the spiritual traditions and establishments these days, and when you look at the investigations from the Charity Commission now in the UK to spiritual tradition, to charities that are based on spiritual traditions, how many take action in this way? Governance. In this particular sutta, the Buddha related the quality of life of the leaders of the states at that time. When kings are unprincipled, royal officers become unprincipled. When royal officers are unprincipled, Brahmins and householders become unprincipled. And when Brahmins and householders are unprincipled, the people and the town and the country become unprincipled. And when the people and town and country are unprincipled, the courses of the sun and the moon become erratic, the courses of the stars and the constellations, the days and the nights, and so on. So it has a ripple effect. The heavens don't provide rain. The crops ripen erratically. So the Buddha likened the living, the quality of life, to the elements in the cosmos. And conversely, when the kings are principled, it has a boomerang effect down the line. in terms of the quality of life of the individuals. Mindful eating is another serious issue which concerns sustainable consumption. This is the first dietary statement that was made, I think, in recorded history. And this concerned again a ruler, King Pasenadi of Kosala, overate, visited the Buddha, engorged and panting. And observing the state of the king at the time, I suppose he was probably belching and sitting very uncomfortably, the Buddha said, when a person is constantly mindful and knows when enough food has been taken, all their afflictions become more slender. They age more gradually, protecting their lives. And this was said in a compassionate way, without necessarily pointing a finger at an individual, but in a general way, the Buddha uttered these terms: when a person is constantly mindful. And then the king, to cut the long story short, accepted the advice of the Buddha and gradually settled down to moderate eating. And later, he said, indeed, the Buddha has shown me compassion in different ways for my welfare right here and now, and also for the future. So it was not just something that was just for the immediate, but for the future. We deal with another interesting issue, which is not necessarily talked too much in Buddhist circles, which concerns human trafficking. And human trafficking and the appetite and consumption for sex and lust in particular was a matter of grave concern amongst the society at the time. And in the numbered discourses 721, when the Vajjis came and asked him about advice to live in social harmony, he said, as long as the Vajjis don't rape or abduct women and girls from their families and force them, only growth is to be expected of them, for them, and not decline. And in the shorter elephant footprint similar to Janusoni, a powerful Brahmin, the Buddha directly said, talked about avoiding receiving women and girls. Ittikumarika patijana pativirato hote. And then male and female bond servants. Dasidasa patijana pativirato hote. There is not much of a difference in my book between bond servants and slavery, actually. A few bits of maybe demarcations here and there, but I tend to liken both together. But here is a situation where the Buddha dealt with safeguarding, because this was a practice that was common at that time. And he was not fearful of dealing with these issues and then talking about them to the rulers at the time. There is another one, which I found in the Sutta Nipata, where he talks about the sentient beings who refrain from receiving women and girls are few, whilst others who do not refrain are many. Going into recycling. This is a very interesting response, which Ananda gave to the king when he was asked about how the monks would be using robes. And this is a summary of the entire sutta. This is a very long discourse, but this summary was done by Professor Lily De Silva in one of her writings. When new robes are received and the old robes are used as coverlets, the old coverlets as mattresses, mattress covers as rugs, old rugs as dusters, old tattered dusters are kneaded with clay and repair cracked floors and walls. A system of recycling. Accountability. Just to point out that accountability for actions was a serious concern in that time, and of course coming down in the Vinaya, where in one of the rules, if a bhikkhu destroys or causes the destruction of plants, nature, that have already reached a growing stage or completed their growth, he commits an offense which must be committed. And if a bhikkhu undertakes an act with the intention to kill an animal and succeeds in killing it, he commits a pachitta. So these are things which are clearly related to use of the natural resources at that time. So he talked about the purpose of wealth. Because the Buddha was not against wealth. We talked about the wise endowed with virtues shine forth like a burning fire, gathering wealth as bees do to honey, and heaping it up like an anthill. Once wealth is accumulated, family and household life may follow. So in the Anyanya Sutta, the Buddha described 4 types of happiness. The happiness of eating, of earning, Atti Sukha. The happiness of using, Bhoga Sukha. The happiness of debtlessness, Anyanya Sukha. And the happiness of blamelessness, Anavajya Sukha. I'm going to, because it is now nearly, I think 8 o'clock, I'm going to skip this section, but I assure you I will come back and deal with this in due course. But what the Buddha repeatedly in the discourses highlighted was liberation from conditioning. Liberation of our minds from conditioning, which is very relevant to dealing with the negative forces of the market economy. He talked about the need to be able to be aware of the present moment, because there are latent tendencies within individuals. The primeval brain, which he often talked about. The latent tendencies. The neuroscientists now talk about the primeval brain. And the antidote to that is bhavana, which is not really meditation, but the cultivation of the mind through our own efforts, which lead to liberation from conditioning. So here are some takeaways that Buddhism offers to the world on sustainable consumption. From greed to need, from conditioning to liberation, from impulse buying to reflective buying, from competition to cooperation, from a me first attitude to we all, from curative health to preventive health, from individual interests to community interests, from rights to obligations, from independence to interdependence, from my country to one world. So we have clear evidence that the Buddha and his followers addressed the critical issues during their time. And these issues are more than relevant to what is going on at the moment. And the solutions that the Buddha gave to deal with these issues is relevant today, not only for today, but for generations to the come. The Dhamma is echo, the Dhamma is radical, and the Dhamma is engaged. Thank you very much. I'll hand you back now to the other Don, but I hope we can now have a lively audience participation, and also bearing in mind we need to take into account Pushpa's question and comments. I can't hear you. You need to unmute yourself, Don.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much, Don, for that very comprehensive overview, where you offered perspectives on Buddhism and sustainability. I have taken down some notes about the various aspects you discussed, which I will refer to again at the end of the Q&A. I do not want to take time at this moment in time to talk about the summary, because I think the important thing is really to invite the audience to make any comments, to take their questions. So I'd like to start maybe with Pushpa's question that you raised at midway through Don's very interesting presentation.
Yeah, Pushpa, can you please repeat what you said? Unmute yourself, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you for the stimulating talk and the discussion. I sometimes wonder why Buddha recommended the lifestyle to use the begging bowl in the lifestyle of a monk. Is it because it gave more time for the monks to practice Dhamma, or I wonder what the rationale behind that was? Because Buddha recommended so many lifestyles, like having a siesta in the afternoon, and those things. There is I can see there's a scientific basis in what he recommended in his life when you analyze his lifestyle. But using the begging bowl, I would like to know the rationale
behind it. Right. I have my view on this. I have my clear view on this, but I would like to drag Bhante Panivamsa in as well, because he has been also doing this experientially. Would you be kind enough to please make a comment on this, Bhante?
Yes, I mean, with regards to, do you want to go first, Don? And then
no, go ahead, please, sir.
Well, I think with regards to the usage of the bowl is not just for eating. The bowl was used by the monks and for a various amount of reasons, including as a storage device for when they would travel. And also during times of rain, they would also store their robes in the bowl, right? In the bowl. And also, this is in terms of when the monks would go on alms round. If they did not have this container, how are the monks going to receive the food? And the Buddha was quite clear of the distance that should be maintained, and all of these practices. And the alms bowl allows for clear distance between the laity and the monks, but also enough for the laity to support the monks. Also, because the monks also went to the rivers to take showers, they would also use the bowl as a vessel to sort of shower from the river as well. So the alms bowl was used for a variety of purposes, as mentioned in the Vinaya Pitaka by the ancient monks, and is still used in the same manner today.
Thank you. That was quite an interesting response from Bhante. Thank you, Bhante. My own personal view, reading the suttas, is that the Buddha took a very strategic decision. Considering the fact that he had some 6 years also before going around looking at what was happening with the spiritual traditions. And in the previous suttas, we talked about his comments about profligate living. So I think he realized, or he fashioned, the challenge, which is to live without too many possessions, or hardly any, but also the discipline also of being able to be dependent on the community for your existence. Because your effectiveness or your existence depended on how effective you were in the community. It's an extraordinary decision, practice to follow, particularly in this day and age. That's my take on it. Any others have any views on this?
Dil, I think you've had your hand.
Yes, Dil, please.
Please
Go on.
I have heard this from Ajahn Amaro, when people ask, Westerners ask why people had to, take to go pinna paths and begging. And there were several reasons, some of which have come to my mind now. One is that there was a rule that when you go, so there were certain routes that were, and you had to walk a certain distance so that you could come back in time by midday. You had to share all what the different monks went in the different directions, and then that's how they partake their meal, to say that whatever was offered was for the Sangha and not for one particular bhikkhu. But also that they could never leave out a house and go. So however poor or however rich, they had to visit each house. And of course, if they didn't get anything, they would just move over. And this was to say that it was what you said, it was a need and not a greed, so that they could select what they wanted. And they also gave an opportunity for however poor you were to be able to put even some little thing that they had made into that bowl without feeling bad that they couldn't feed one particular monk or a group of monks. So whatever they had, a part of what they had, they could and feel good about giving. So that gave a chance of doing wholesome karma for the people, but also that you wouldn't select. And there was, even now, they're not allowed, you're supposed to put all the food, and in Ajahn Chah's time, they actually mixed everything and made it all into quite a messy thing, the desserts, the sweets and things, so that people had to use without looking at how well presented it was. So there were lots of things about the need to the greed, but also giving an opportunity to the community to do wholesome deeds, and also for people not to be selective. And all this was to get rid of the desire or the greed or craving that one has for food. And the reason why it was one meal a day and why they don't do it is because he felt that the amount of energy that was needed, you didn't have to keep on eating just because food was there. And it also gave a lot of time for the monks to be able to reflect and do their meditation, to have that group discussion without again having to cook and do things. And also they were dependent on laity And so otherwise lay people would have had to give. So there were many, many reasons why that practice of Pinapata was done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dale. Thank you. We have another question from Samantha. Could you unmute and please kindly put your video on as well, if you don't mind.
Oh, the video is a bit difficult at the
That's
moment.
all right then.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, Don. I'll maybe sort that out next time, another time. Yeah, I heard about giving the going on the Pindapatha thing from somewhere to develop the quality of humbleness and maybe the paramita of dana, and to both parties and for the lay community as well, to be teach them to be generous and develop the quality of giving and letting go, and that sort of thing. Maybe that's something that I heard as well.
Thank you very much. No, thank you, Dylan. Thank you, Samantha. These are very, very interesting points that you have made, very relevant. And going back to Dill's point on sharing, this is really quite important to highlight these concerns because we live in a me-first society. This is the crux of the economic growth situation that we are going on today. And look at where it has got us. It has always been with vaccines, again, also has been a me-first situation. My country first in terms of vaccinating. So to be able to bring the food and then share it with the community is an incredible change in human attitude, because we tend to go on the basis of the latent tendency of survival. Pleased to meet you. So the Buddha demonstrated that human attitudes can change.
Thank you, Don. We have another 15 minutes left, and I would like to encourage anyone else. You could put your hand up, you can unmute and ask a question. If you're not comfortable to do that, there's always the chat box. And if you have any comments or questions, you can also put it in there and then we'll pick it up. So this is your opportunity to ask or ask questions or make a few comments. I really would, yes, Dharmasiri, go ahead. You will have to unmute yourself, Dharmasiri. Thank you.
Yeah.
Don, you had a separate slide on latent tendencies, and can you put that one and give us a little bit more information regarding that? Because you just pass it very quickly. Which the latent tendencies in Pali, it's ansaya.
Andusaya, yes.
Yeah. Can you put that slide and give us a little bit of more explanation?
Yes, I'll try to go back again. It might be a bit tricky at the moment to share the screen again, Dharmasiri. Thank you so much for that comment, because I think this is one of the most important aspects of Buddhism which we need to also highlight along with other things. Because the neuroscientists nowadays, or the evolutionary biologists, also talk about the primeval brain, which is fashioned along fear, food, fleeing, and reproduction.
Oh, I see.
And the Buddha went further. 2,500 years ago, he was far ahead of what is being realized now, to talk about the latest latent tendencies, the underlying tendencies, the anusayas. And the 7 latent tendencies are kamaraga, sensual desire; aversion, patijja; ditti, views; doubt, vichikicha, conceit, mana, bhavaraga, passion for becoming, and ignorance, avidya. So, of course, the anusayas carry negative connotations. But the Buddha pointed out that these are latent tendencies that people are born with.
Yeah.
So the critical element is not to necessarily go into a situation or a state when you have these tendencies, but to recognize them that these are within, but to deal with them. That is where he offered the bhavana process, to my mind.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yes, I agree with you. Yeah, that's especially discussed in Madhupindika Sutra also. Yeah,
Indeed.
yeah,
Indeed.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
That's a good reference
yeah,
as a discourse for the
yeah,
Anusayas.
yeah, yeah.
Yes, Dil?
I was interested. I would like Don for you to say something about. I remember you put a slide up where you mentioned if the kings are corrupt, then the chieftains are corrupt, and then the people who are higher up in the society, and gradually and it goes down, and finally the heavens and the rains and the sun and the moon and everything gets corrupt. And I was thinking that this is really now being borne out by when you look at all the latest things that are coming up in the new physics that we are all talking about, which is not the Newtonian, but quantum physics. Because when people are corrupt, and if you have like Kalyana Mitas, which is the opposite, then obviously your thoughts will get more positive and wholesome tendencies. But the opposite of it, when those who are the leaders of a society do things which are unwholesome, then it will filter down to all the people. But beyond that, I think what science is now showing is that because of the thoughts that people then will have, and that is reflected in the emotions and the feelings, and these have a direct effect on people and on the cells and the body mechanisms, and they therefore cause quite a lot of negative interactions. And there is an immediate effect of, because we are not really particles, right? We know that matter becomes energy in quantum level, and that the particles will become a wave. So at that, the human cells and the particles, they will have a vibration that is felt, and this is felt in the atmosphere. It's radiated to the whole of the cosmos, and we know from the Agana Sutta how we came into beings and where we are going, the different planes of existence. So we are all, the whole universe and the metaverses, we are all connected. So if we have emotions and thoughts and which are corruptible and which are very negative, then there's a wave that goes beyond us. We are not isolated individuals, that we emanate and that we infect. And in a way, in my own mind, this whole COVID-19 is actually a phenomena that shows, because we didn't look after the nature and all and the rest of it, which actually gave us the water and the sustain, and our bodies are all these the elements that have come into it, and because we have sort of not cared only about ourselves, and we kill everything around and don't look at nature, so we have done a lot of unwholesome things, and the vibrations of these from our thoughts and from our deeds and actions infiltrate, and therefore you find that things like very negative elements like the viruses come up, and then it becomes a competition. You develop vaccines, and then the virus gets stronger, and then you again say it's only for me and for myself and not for the others. So in all this kind of the Kana Day, the way that the world is growing is all about me, and at the at the real root of it, it's this me and mine and you, and this. If you don't have, as you showed in your slide, if you don't have, if you have competition and not cooperation, and if you don't have oneness, right, then you will find, and not the individual but the company, then all these things will break down, and that's why a lot of these things that are happening. That's my just feeling. Thank you.
That in a nutshell is the interconnectedness of the environment. which is Buddhism.
Exactly. And that's what the Buddha saw when he realized he didn't have somebody, a heavenly body coming and telling it. He actually, because he, by so many years of perfecting and the paramis and intending and the nihata virana, he kept on developing his mind. And when he sat under the bo tree so many 2,564 years ago and said, I won't get up, with that real, with that superhuman effort, when he said, I won't get up, his mind developed. And as you refer to the primeval brain, which we call the reptilian brain and the mammalian, and you get the brain, which is much more, which is, though we are human, we can really develop a brain to be enlightened. Each one of us can do that. And that's the final brain that we could do, but we don't use that brain. So unfortunately, therefore, we behave like reptiles, in a reactionary way and not responding. And as you mentioned, those primary kind of tendencies of fright and flight and or of getting frozen. So therefore, we get these consequences back because we are not responsible and we don't take a step back and we don't respond to the needs of oneness, but we just react because we see separation. So the meditation is so important, because that is the one way where we take away from the thinking brain and we actually go inwards and we watch our mind. And then as we keep doing that, you have insights and you then realize who you really are. And with the teachings and with the Kalyana Mitras and listening to the Dhamma and by discussion and with Yonisa Manasikara, which, by reflection, that's how you can little by. And if you don't do that, we see what is happening in the world.
Yeah, thank you, Dale. I assure you that we will go into that particular area in detail in another discussion.
Yes,
Pushpa?
and Don, I think the other point I wanted to make in relation to what Dale said, and the point that you made in the slide where you connected what the leaders are doing, what people are doing, and how it can actually affect the movement of the sun and moon. Now, what we're seeing in the world today, because of the loss of the natural resources, the rape of the Amazon, because we are putting all this plastic into the oceans, we see, and the global warming that's taking place. I mean, climate change is because of the carbon emissions really wrought by human beings since the Industrial Revolution. So yes, we can see in the world today, the wildfires in Australia, the Great Barrier Reef, we know 50% has now died. If we don't limit temperature rise to 1.5 degrees beyond the industrial, from the time of the Industrial Revolution, that temperature rise to 1.5 degrees, we will not have an Earth for future generations. So it is very, very serious. And it's interesting. I think that slide that you presented about the role of the leadership and the impact it can have on the environment, it's very telling. Thank you very much, Don. Thank you very much. We have another question from Pushpa. Yes, please, go ahead, Pushpa.
This is not a question, it's a comment about Lord Buddha, about the lifestyle that Lord Buddha recommended. Lord Buddha slept on his right side, and the physiological perspective or reason may be that the way on when we sleep on the right side, the weight of, there is less weight on the heart and the lungs. When lungs are filled with blood, there is the weight of the lung and the heart and lungs will be less if you sleep on the right side.
Indeed.
Yeah.
I have heard of that. There are some Indian Vedic specialists who have also highlighted this. This is a very important point. But thank you for the previous points. Do you realize the connection between now Buddhism and sustainability and what Buddhism can offer to towards a sustainable world?
Yes.
This incredible teaching that we have?
Yes,
its global relevance?
yes. I could see the connection.
Yeah. And I'm asking the rest.
Yes,
Uh,
I think we have 3 more minutes before we finish the session today. So I really invite anybody else who has not raised a question or made a comment, kindly do unmute yourselves and be part of this dialogue conversation with Don on the Buddhist take on sustainability. It's been an interesting discussion so far. I really would like any other person who has not raised a question to join the discussion.
Up until we do have a question, Gihanta, I would like to direct attention to the comment that is made in the chat section by Gehan Herat. I think it is a usual stance that we often take to blame other people, especially politicians. And of course, politicians are to blame to a certain extent, but we must also question ourselves about what I can do as a person. What can I do as a family man in order to affect my carbon footprint for the environment, for health, for the people living around me? Just like quoting Mr. Khan's, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, he gave an address at the Oxford Union, and one of the students asked Mr. Khan, Pakistan is a very corrupted place. How do you intend on getting rid of corruption in your country? This was asked by Mr. Khan at the Oxford Union. And what Mr. Khan said was, the leaders alone cannot eradicate corruption. Corruption can only be eradicated if the leaders, the middle level people, and also the grassroots people are all motivated in order to eradicate corruption. So to create a sustainable world, in order, of course, with the wealth of knowledge that the Buddha has also given us, I think we all have a responsibility to work together and not wait until politicians do their bit, but we must start doing our bit. I think this is very important to contemplate.
Yes, thank you, Bhante. May I make a comment, Gihanta?
Yes, go ahead.
I think the critical thing that the Buddha also demonstrated, as far as I'm concerned, is the fact that individuals can make an impact. Thank you very much to Gyan Herat.
Thank you.
Don, I think you've gone mute. Yes, there you go.
Yeah.
Fine.
Thank you very much for your comments. I think it is, your comments are really interesting, but as Bhante said earlier, the critical thing for us is to be able to realize what Buddhism is about, in the fact that the Buddha demonstrated that change can come through individual change. And the Buddha initiated a movement, if I may be bold enough to say so, not just a spiritual tradition. So you have this group of people more than 2,500 years ago who initiated the process led by the Buddha, which now spans around 600 million to 700 million throughout the world. So it was a movement, and the Buddha's teachings in terms of governance in a nation or an empire was put into practice by Emperor Asoka. When you look at what he did with the situation there. So the critical element is, as Bhante said earlier, what is it that we as individuals can do? Because each one has the potential to be able to impact our societies where we are, our countries where we are, and to also have a global impact.
which Don leads very nicely to a question that I have wanted to ask you, and I'm going to ask you now because there's a nice tie-in here. When we talk about the spiritual practice, Don, particularly in the way we engage nowadays, we go on retreats, we listen to Dhamma sermons, we have Dhamma discussions just like this. There is a lot of emphasis on our own mind development, and that's very good. But I'm not so sure how much Buddhists are necessary, or the way the Dhamma is being understood and practiced. Where is the link to the social change that we have to bring about in our communities? I mean, Bhante Panyon talked about the sort of dialogue or engagement with the political leadership, because we see in a lot of Buddhist countries that whilst you have the Sangha, you have the people who are in the Sangha in the Aranyas, the Sangha in the temples, and a lot of people practicing the Dhamma. The political direction or the governance of the country is not does not seem to be influenced by the Dhamma, and that is leading to lots of issues. So any comments about that, about how maybe Buddhism can play a bigger role in societal change and governance today?
Fine. Very briefly, Buddhism for me was what sustains my life. And during my time as a United Nations diplomat, Buddhism for me was, by and large, something that enabled me to do the impossible, and also to be involved in doing things that I would have thought could not be done through a process of bhavana, through the cultivation of the mind. Personally, it was very good for me because I gave up drink and smoking and saved a lot of money. So that was extremely beneficial from a personal side of things. Apart from that, there were things which we did in terms of treaties where we got together and worked together to bring nations together that were conflicting to work together. And also launched initiatives where today now in the world, sustainability is a household term. It was not talked about before, or there was a lot of resistance from ministers of economic affairs, chancellors, and so on to sustainability. They didn't want to hear about it. And also with climate change. The other thing is that there are groups throughout the Buddhist nations who also initiate and implement really interesting projects, but they are not written up too much about. And we don't know. And this is a big gap in terms of what is being done in places like Thailand, Sri Lanka, the Republic of Korea, Japan, Taiwan, and so on. And we don't know about this. Now, the other element is, I think there needs to be a further discussions about how Buddhism, in terms of governance, the very clear principles of governance which the Buddha laid out to the rulers during his time, which are more than relevant to what is going on in the world today. I think we need to take time to see how we together highlight these concerns and bring them to the attention of the leadership at this time. You're muted, Gyanta. You're muted.
Thank you very much, Don, for that answer. We are now about 5 minutes beyond time. Bhante, what is your advice?
Yeah. Just before you hand over to Bhante, I'd like to if the participants want the notes that I have presented to you in my slide presentation to put it up for you so that you can download, I'll be more than happy to have that available for you so that you can take it, make notes, and use the references. Would that be useful for all of you?
Yes, Don. Yeah, that will be very useful. Can you
Wonderful.
please? Yeah.
I will do that.
Gyanta, can I
Yes.
just ask a quick question
Yes,
from
please go ahead.
John?
Yes.
Can you tell me, I noticed when you mentioned all the Buddhist countries, you left out Burma, but more than that, I wanted to ask you, how is it that one Buddhist country, Bhutan has the gross national happiness and they're the happiest people, they're one of the poorest countries, they're also Buddhist. And how is it that, why is it that they have sort of concentrated on all the ideology that you have discussed today, and some of the other countries are at different degrees away from that? What is a big difference that they uphold all this and the others do some of it and some do quite badly? Can you give us some explanation? Thank you.
Yeah, Gyanta, that question was asked to you.
No, I really
No, I
wanted
think
to
it
ask.
was directed to you.
Was it addressed to me? Okay.
Yes, I was addressing it to you.
Sorry, I misheard. Excuse me. I do apologize, ma'am. Sorry.
That's all right.
No, this is an issue which comes down the ages. And that happens not just to the Buddhist tradition, it happens to all the other countries involving other traditions. The critical thing, I think, is to realize that it is important. My concern is that we need to do more to highlight, like the way Bhikkhu Bodhi is doing in different places, and a couple of other Bhantes, and now the Dhamma Center. We need to bring these issues into the forefront because we have to have a conversation about this as to what exactly is it that the Buddha said and did. I think it is really important to go back to the roots to find out to what exactly is it that he did and say. Because these kinds of discussions I have not often participated in terms of discussing these issues. But in that, I believe each and every one of us has a role to play. Gyanta, you're muted.
Thank you very much, Don. And I think we are now coming to the close of this session. First of all, I'd like to thank Don for that very comprehensive and very insightful sort of exposition of how Buddhism links up with sustainability, Buddhism's takes on sustainability. You were comprehensive in the sense you talked about consumer culture, what sustainability is, and I think that really important explanation of making sure that we consume and produce so that we meet the requirements not only of this generation but generations to come. You talked about sustainable consumption, governance, human trafficking, safeguarding of women and girls, mindful eating, recycling. You talked about the inequalities in the world economy, taking examples like the fashion industry and the pollutants that the industry causes. You mentioned how specific instances in the Buddha's life, from the way food was being eaten to the way the monks would clothe themselves, different examples, and even you talked about the carbon footprint of Buddha's lifestyle. and really and reciting, which I thought was very, very interesting. And yeah, bringing home to us what sometimes we gloss over. These are aspects of sustainability that the Buddha introduced, not necessarily in those words, but sustainability almost is integral to how the Buddhist livelihood was taught to us. So thank you so much for that wonderful talk. I'd also really like to thank the audience for the fantastic engagement we've had today, the questions and the observations that you've raised to make this a very productive discussion. Now I'd like to hand over to Bhante to close today's session and also talk to you about the next session in this series, Buddhism and Sustainability.
Thank you.
Bhante, over to you.
Thank you to both the Dons for coming together, Gihanta for joining the session this week, and for Don for the last session, and of course today's session as well. It was very insightful, and I love the interaction that we had from all the participants as well. The next session on sustainability and Buddhism will be on the topic of Buddhism and social inclusion, which will be held on the 17th of June 2021 at 7 p.m. the same time, but we might actually change the time. So we will, if there are any changes, we will let you know. But if you do want to receive updates on these courses, classes, programs that we do offer, make sure that you do subscribe to the Dhamma Center newsletter. Don's profile is available under the guest speakers category. So if you do visit the guest speakers category and click on Don's image, you will find the resources to the links, the resources to the past previous talks, as well as this talk. This will be uploaded as well. And the presentation that Don did will also be uploaded onto that Don's profile. So if you do want to revisit and to sort of collect the presentation, you can collect it from the website. So thank you very much. Again, thank you so much, Don. Thank you, Gihanta. And thank you everyone for joining in. I will see you all next month. Take care and good night.